Hey, welcome back. Today's video is about one of those things that you need to do at least annually to your rifle. We talked about changing out the striker spring, but there's other things about that rifle that decay over time that you need to be aware of and stay ahead of if you want to be hyper competitive in any of the precision shooting sports. Today's subject is going to be the rifle bedding, that connection between the action and the stock that is so critical to getting good results out of a rifle. You know, you can have a rifle that shoots pretty well with pretty poor bedding until the temperature changes, or until the humidity changes, or until you put load on the stock, and then it falls apart and starts throwing flyers. You don't want flyers, so let's take care of it now. For this particular video, I'm just going to put the barrel vise up on my reloading bench. I don't change barrels up here. This is the first time that this particular vise has ever been hooked to this bench, because I have no intention of using it up here. I'm just using it as a basis to hold the rifle in place so I can video. Now, I like to do this test horizontally. Some gunsmiths do it vertically, and that is totally okay. There is no difference in the outcome when you get right down to it. So don't take this as the Bible on how to do it. Instead, this is one way of doing it. And I'm just going to show you what happens to the bedding over time. Now, this particular rifle, when I rebedded it about 2 years ago, had an absolute zero bedding that I showed my patrons on Patreon. At this point, almost 2 years later, this bedding's getting old. The epoxy should have shrunk quite a bit by now. So let's take a look at it and see if it's out of spec. Because if it is out of spec, we just need to go in there and rebed it really quickly, not a difficult process, to make sure that it is absolutely as tight as possible so that it works perfectly for us and gives us the best possible results on target. So we're going to mount the rifle upside down in this barrel vise, and you'll notice the barrel vise isn't tight. I just snugged it down with my fingers. I didn't even use the wrench that's sitting on the bench. I just spun it down. That's good enough. It's just holding the rifle in place for me. Now, I've attached the test indicator to the barrel and put the tip of the indicator on the fore end of the rifle. I have dual cameras here so that you can see the wrench and the indicator at the same time as I'm loosening and tightening stuff, so I don't have to do quite so much narrating. The first thing we're going to do, because this is a flat bottom action with 3 screws in it, is loosen the center screw. The center screw, in my opinion, is a safety device on this particular style of action. Center screws are neat for a couple of reasons. First, they limit the travel if you have a differential between the front and rear of the bedding. So they tend to keep the rifle more accurate as the bedding starts to decay. That doesn't mean you can get away with, or it doesn't mean you should try to get away with bad bedding. Instead, you want to keep that bedding up to spec, and as it decays over time, your rifle's going to shoot better longer before it starts throwing those weird flyers that you see when the bedding goes bad. First thing we're doing is we're loosening the center bolt. That's our safety device. We don't want it in there. We're just going to take it about a turn or 2 turns loose. We don't need it super loose, just loose enough that, well, it's not constraining the motion of the action in the bedding. The big test here is to loosen 1 bolt at a time of the remaining 2 and see what happens to our test indicator. So I'm going to start with the front bolt on this one because, well, that's usually where we find the most motion, and away we go. Loosening this bolt, ooh, it moved a lot. It moved over 5/1000ths of an inch. This is a fail on this test. Anything more than about 3/1000ths is unacceptable at any time. Immediately after rebedding in action, you want it to be 1/1000ths or less if possible, but never more than 2/1000ths of an inch motion. So let's go ahead and tighten that one back down, and it goes right back where it came from. In other words, it returned to exactly where it was. Now let's loosen the rear one with the front one tight, and we see very little motion. What that means to us is our bedding underneath the rear of the action is low. In other words, the glass bedding has shrunk away from the back of the action, and now we're flexing just a little bit on that action when it's torqued in. It's not horrible, but it's not good for absolute precision and accuracy. Ask any of the accuracy gunsmiths, and they will tell you that bedding is critical to ultimate success in a rifle. So what do we do about it? Well, the first thing we're going to do if we're trying to fix this rifle is take the stock off of the action and make sure that there isn't any trash between them. What this is indicating with the 5/1000 motion 15 inches in front of the front pillar is that a very, very, very small gap is occurring there. Well, that could be something as simple as a grain of sand under the action when it got put back in, a little bit of trash in it, or some decay of the bedding material. Now, I'm not going to show you how to take it apart and inspect it and figure it out. That's for you to do. I want to just give you a little advice here because if you're going to shoot at the very top levels of F-class, I need you to understand something. You need to be able to do your own bedding. If you can't, well, you're going to spend a lot of time with your rifles in the shop with a gunsmith because gunsmiths are busy. And ultimately, we don't want to be dependent on a gunsmith to be able to take time out of their schedule to fix the bedding every time the epoxy shrinks away from the action. Some of the very top shooters in F-class are rebedding every 6 months to a year. Can you imagine having to send your rifle out every 6 months to a year to a gunsmith to go through a new bedding job? That would be ridiculous. Instead, you're better off having the skills to be able to do that bedding yourself. I learned how to do it from looking at videos on YouTube and websites on the internet and a little bit of time reading Accurate Shooter. You should do the same because I have nothing to add to what I've been able to find online. It works perfectly well for me. So guys, in the end, you have to understand that bedding decays over time, no matter which material is used. Some are better than others, but it always decays over time. And you are going to have to freshen that bedding every once in a while. Now, one quick caveat here, and that is V-block mounted actions. If you have a perfectly cylindrical action with no magazine cutout in a V-block, well, it's not going to pass this test. That doesn't mean it's not going to shoot well, because V-blocks, by the nature of their design, tend to spread the V just a little bit as you torque the action in. And what that does is it equalizes the pressure along the action and helps to keep it from moving around, or at least out of plane, as you're doing your shooting, and tends to keep the accuracy in for quite a while. However, that same action in perfect glass bedding seems to shoot just ever so slightly better. In the end, if you want a rifle that shoots the ultimate small groups, you have to have that bedding as perfect as possible. And in order to keep it as perfect as possible, you need to check it every once in a while. It doesn't take a lot of tooling. It doesn't take a lot of time. Till next time, shoot straight. Keep track of your rifle maintenance because it does make a difference. And I'll see you in the next video.